to be speaking tomorrow afternoon, and Jez is a modern shaman, if you like. Now, Peter Taylor was discussing earlier on the importance of shamanism in the world today, and we're going to hear much, much more from that with hopefully all sorts of wonderful stuff tomorrow from Jez. But Jez is a man with all sorts of views, all sorts of background, and we'll hopefully find out more about him as we go. So a big round of applause, first of all, please, for Jez Hughes. Sheila, your end.
No, we're not doing it that way, Andy.
Oh, God almighty, right, okay.
We're going round the line.
We're going down the line, are we? So there's me, I was trying to get balance. Bring balance to the force. All right, well, talking of the force, the person the person you see here, for those of you that have ever watched Edge TV, you might recognise this chap here. This is mysteriously named Alex G, who has been the presenter of many programmes on Edge Media TV. You will be hearing from Alex on Sunday, where he's going to be telling us all sorts of interesting things about the connection between cult TV and alternative, mysterious, hidden secrets and views. So, please, Mr. Alex G. You can tell he's a TV presenter, can't you? Right.
And our next panellist in the line there is Helen Sewell. And Helen is an astrologer. She's also a marriage guidance counsellor. So if you've got any problems, have a quick word afterwards. Helen gave a fascinating talk to us a year or so ago about the astrology of 2012, and I think a lot of us are still remembering about that, thinking about how things are this year. And she also made a contribution to Jason's talk this morning. He was referring to some of the things that she told him about the astrology. So, ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome, please, to Helen Sewell. And the next in the lineup is Marcus Allen, a familiar face, I'm sure, to many of you because he's been here pretty well from the beginning. He is the editor of Nexus magazine. Is that right? It's the editor, the British editor. Publisher. UK publisher of Nexus magazine. And he hangs around in the stalls room during the weekend, so you can see him at any time you like. He's also contributed a lot, given quite a few talks here at the Symposium on hidden history. And he's been a panellist for us a few times as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause for Marcus Allen. Then our next panellist is Deirdre Edwards, who was speaking this morning. And as you know, she's also one of our coach tour guides. So I think I'll just say thank you very much, Deirdre, and welcome Deirdre Edwards.
And lastly, but not leastly, we have the gentleman that has just shared many talents with you over the last half an hour or so. What's not so well known is that Piers, as well as being a multi-talented musician, also shares some of our views and started to get a bit daring on his Facebook page and upsetting the natives, apparently, with all this talk of conspiracy and all this nonsense. So, please, Mr. Piers Adams. Okay. So, if anybody's in control of lights, if we can take the room lighting up, now would be a good moment, if anybody's around, to do that, so we can see you, good people. And we're going to then basically, what we're going to do, we'll sort of split the room, so we'll take a question, as it were, from this half of the room, and then we'll have one from that half of the room. Please speak into the microphone because we are recording this and you won't be heard if the mic hasn't come to you. So stick your hand up, we'll come to you, give you a microphone, and off you go and ask what you wish, and we shall see what results from this good bunch of people here. So, well, I've said quite a lot, so Sheila, you start from your side. Right, come on, let's have a question.
Someone on this side. Oh, gentleman's here.
Hi, this is a question for Marcus. Marcus, first of all, big thank you to Nexus magazine because I've had persistent health problems all through my life, but it changed after getting your magazine in the Southern Hemisphere and trying the Holder Clark Zapper. The second thing why I bought it was about vaccinations, and my daughter, despite all the doomsayers, is not vaccinated, and she's doing great things intellectually and in sports. But my question is this: having read the magazine for something like 14 years now, there are a lot of things in there. I'd like to sort of develop and build. I've only got the ideas though. But so, is there a forum for some of the the technological ideas you get in the magazine where people try these things out?
Good question. In a word, no, there isn't. We tried it, and several people have asked if we can promote the idea that Nexus Forum or Nexus Readers groups, because people are spread out. I mean, Nexus is sold from the Shetland Islands to Channel Islands and all the way in between. If people want to get together, yes, we will carry ads for it. We've always offered that. And then it's a matter of an individual doing it. Because to organise that, I live in East Grinstead, so it would only be in the sort of Sussex area. And I've always reckoned that Andy's group down in Burgess Hill, the Sussex Secular Research or Crop Circle group, which he started 20 years ago, basically filled that function, because a lot of people did attend that initially for crop circles, but it's broadened out considerably since then. It's really down to individuals to do it. But I'm glad that you like the idea of the health articles. A lot of people say that they buy Nexus for the health articles. They can't be doing with this UFO stuff, and the conspiracy stuff is complete nonsense anyway. But they love the health articles. And a lot of people will also say the other side of it, yeah, I can't be doing with the health articles, they're far too complicated, but give me UFOs every day and I love it. So you've got both sides of it, but there are a lot of people out there who read Nexus. And I'm glad you found it's been useful, especially on the vaccination. It's one of the major ongoing subjects that we've covered. Primarily when Duncan, the editor out in Australia, when his children needed to be vaccinated, he had to do the research to find out what was going on. And he was not very enthusiastic about it. He's still not. And obviously they've worked well because they're now both grown up and doing very well. And I hope your daughter does equally well. And I hope you find successful treatments for health issues. So anybody who doesn't know Nexus, it wasn't my promotion. Thank you for your question.
Not at all, thank you.
What did he slip you earlier on? Okay, let's take a question from this side. Is there anybody on this side with anything interesting to say? I'm sure there must be. You're just too shy. No? How boring. All right. Oh, no. Oh, suddenly we do have a C. You threaten to take it away. It's the scarcity principle, you see. Take it away and a question arises. Here we go.
Are you playing me? No. A question for Piers. Is there anything in the Pied Piper of Hamelin, legends and whatever, have you got any thoughts on that?
In a word, no, to quote Marcus. No, as far as I know, they're just stories. So yeah. I don't know if there's any truth. Does anybody else know that? I probably should, shouldn't I?
Yeah, well, I think there is a sound. That there are sounds that you can control. That's the theory I heard about the Pied Piper of Hamelin, that there was particular resonance.
Yeah, quite likely.
Yeah.
But no, in a word, I mean, as far as I know, that is just a story. But it probably is based on earlier myths, which I shall look up. Thank you for that. I'm going to look that up. The next time I come back in another 7 years, I'll have an answer for you.
It could be, from a shamanic perspective, soul theft by the spirits. Sometimes they can take away the souls, and we can follow it with music, similar to the idea of going in with the sirens, where it's something so beautiful and so majestic. You follow it, and your soul, you lose part of your soul as you go. And hopefully it comes back, and it comes back renewed and cleansed. So it is a healing thing as well.
Okay. Do we have a question on this side? Thank you.
My question concerns David Icke. I've been a great admirer of his for 20-odd years. I think 95% of what he predicted, prophesied, warned about has come true, happened and entered the mainstream. And I wondered what the panel's individual opinions are about the reptile thing. Is this disinformation from the bad guys? Is it a sort of perception from an astral realm that he picks up their reptilian nature? or is he on the ball?
Just to clarify, for anybody here who doesn't know what we mean, there is the theory that the ruling elite of the world are reptilian extraterrestrials, with the monarchy at the top of it. So in case you were wondering what that meant. So come on, panel, what do you think?
Well, to answer your question, which was almost in two parts, so I'll do a first one about David Icke and perhaps our thoughts on him. I have to say I'm probably here because of David Icke. And let me explain that, because it's a sort of a mini epic, but I'll keep it Reader's Digest length for you, okay? What happened was the world started not making a great deal of sense when it came to a certain gentleman called Tony Blair. And what it was, I could not understand how a guy who, a lot of us forget this, a guy who came in and post the death of Diana was looking like he was going to be one of our greatest ever statesmen, would actually flush his reputation across the entire UK and in certain sectors of the world right down the toilet. It didn't make any sense to me. What on earth was he doing with the Iraq situation, the alleged weapons of mass destruction, and everything else? And you start going down the rabbit hole from that point and understanding his motivations. It quickly led on to 9/11. David Icke, at the time, the year, I think it was the year after 9/11, wrote what is still one of the most definitive accounts of what is wrong with the 9/11 fairy story, which we are told is the official version of things. And it was from there that you get into all his other material. And it is always the case that it's the reptilian stuff which is immediately latched onto, because to the majority of people, it's basically, oh, the Queen's a lizard. And that's it. And that's the whole sort of, it's summarised. But then David takes it a different level if you start looking into what he's saying. What he's saying is, we've all got the base of the head here, your reptilian brain. And that's the key to it all. It is not seen so much as a metaphor. But, of course, it goes on to other dimensional aspects with it. But if you pull it back to, hey, guys, we've all got a reptilian brain, and basically that controls your survival instinct, then it makes it a lot easier to comprehend.
But I think David Icke means it literally, though, doesn't he? Yeah. If you read his books, he's absolutely clear that it is literally reptiles.
On an interdimensional level.
On an interdimensional level.
But it's actually crossing through different levels of light and wavelength and everything else that we can't pick up. So, yeah, I mean, at a literal level, yes, it is the Queen's lizard. But, again, it's how it's wrapped up.
With that?
I, like you, I've been really informed by David Icke. I went to see him very, very early on. In fact, I remember being at the Mind, Body and Spirit Festival running a healing stand, and the book stand was next to it, and I kept going over and picking up these books by David Icke, who I didn't have a television at the time, so I hadn't seen the Terry Wogan programme, but it had been in all the newspapers. And I thought, why am I picking up this fellow's book? And for goodness sake, who on earth puts their photograph on the back of a book? I kept going back to that bookshop, so in the end I bought 3 of his books, and I kept them in a brown paper bag, and I read them surreptitiously, and I was in a play in the West End at the time, and everybody in the wardrobe started reading them and grabbing them from me when I was on stage and things like that, and getting very impatient with me because I wouldn't finish book 2. So, of course, he very quickly came to speak in a couple of venues in London, and I went to see him when he was in Alternative, St James's, Piccadilly. He was a bit overawed by speaking in a church. They received 2 volumes of letters of complaints to the fact that they were hosting a talk with him. And then, forward several years, and it changed my life, actually, very positively. And then I went to see him in Red Lion Square, where he gave this 5-hour talk, the first of his long talks. And he talked about the reptilians and the death of Princess Diana, which my dad said was she was murdered right from word go. And I said, oh, don't be so silly. And he said, oh, yes, she wants to marry an Arab. Can't do that. And I said, oh, don't be so stupid. But he was absolutely right, I think. And after that talk, I couldn't sleep for about 3 or 4 nights. And I think the whole of the crop circle community, by the time the summer came, for that 2 years, we were all discussing reptilian. What about this author, that person? What do you reckon? And for 2 years, it was at the top of our conversation. What do you reckon? What do you reckon? And for me, I realized fairly early on, I thought anyway, oh, it's on a 4th dimension. It's maybe how they operate. And I can tell a reptilian, sort of predominantly reptilian person, and I can recognize their sort of behavior as opposed to an earthling's behavior. There's a difference. And when people talk about, oh, how awful we are and how polluting we are and we haven't got good hearts, I think, they're not talking about earthlings here. Because the general earthling has a heart and knows good from bad and it goes against and has a conscience. But there are cold-blooded beings out there who don't work in that way and don't have the best interest of other species at heart. So I think as well, being interested in crop circles, we are very open people, the most open people, I think, on the planet. And when I began to learn about reptilians, and then I read all about Ashiana Dean and the different levels of ETs, and I thought, well, really, we have to be very discerning now. Who are these ETs? Are they all beneficent towards us? Or are we going to be falling into a trap of being maybe controlled, lobotomized again? So I think it's a very interesting question that you brought up. And yes, gets dismissed because obviously seeing the Queen as a reptilian is quite hard to imagine. But I don't know how many of you saw the film V. Yes! I was rehearsing at the time, and during rehearsals, you never read books, you never watch television or go out. You just rehearse. And that night, I didn't learn my lines. I watched this, what I considered a trashy film called V, an American film. I'm not into this, and I didn't watch television, but for some reason or other, there I was, instead of learning my lines, watching V until about 2 o'clock in the morning. Staggered into work the next day to rehearsals, couldn't do a thing, neither could anybody else. We'd all been watching V. It was over 2 nights, if I remember. And the director just was tearing his hair out. He said, what is it? What have you been up to? Oh, we've been watching V. Oh, no, he said. I rang up my mother last night for a chat, and she put the phone down on me. She said, I can't talk now, I'm watching V. And everybody seemed to be tuning into this film called V, which was all about reptilians. Under the skin, there were reptilians, and they were mating with women, and they were giving birth to reptilians. And I think for everybody to have gotten on and watched a film like that was seeding in our consciousness that all was not quite right or what it seemed to be.
And that would probably have been 1984 because it was an Olympics year, and it was actually shown at the same time as the Olympics.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Wow.
There you go. Anorak with flares.
I would like to acknowledge the fact that David Icke not exactly inspired me, but he got to Nexus before I did. He was, I first met David probably 94, where he was touring the country, giving little talks to about 50 or 60 people, Canterbury, Cambridge, Oxford, all around the country. And he was selling a few of his books. He only had about 2 published then. The main one was Robots Rebellion, which got him into big trouble. He was holding up Nexus and saying, if you want to get the information that you need to make sense of this world, buy this magazine. And I thought, oh, that's nice of him. How very kind. And he invited me along, and I went to several of his talks and sold the magazine, and basically it worked very well. A lot of the books that we sold, he bought. A lot of the books that he then wrote were included in his books, which is fine. That's the way knowledge gets disseminated. Times passed. David took his path. Nexus took its path. And the fact that he can now sell out the Wembley Arena is an achievement in itself. Back in '92, there was something called the Global Deception Conference, which was the first time I was fully aware of what this global deception business was starting to be. And they had booked Wembley Arena. Now, Wembley Arena holds 20,000 people. When only 500 turned up, they had to go to the conference centre. It wasn't very well publicised. David is very good at publicity. As far as the reptilians are concerned, to be fair, I've never met any. I don't know, but I see no reason to believe that what he says about them cannot be true, because he's been right in many, many different areas. To be fair, he's also been wrong in certain areas, but he's an indefatigable worker and a writer, and a very good writer. And I would support him as far as I can, and I thank him as well for helping to promote Nexus in the UK. He's a good guy.
I'd like to share. There's Michael Harner. He's one of the great people who brought back shamanism to the West, really, in the 60s and 70s. And he tells this story in his first book when he experiences ayahuasca for the first time. He goes and journeys with ayahuasca in the South American, I think Peru. I think it was Peru. And anyway, he goes, he's never done anything like it. He's very nervous. He's an intellectual from an academic background, anthropologist. And he experiences something with the ayahuasca where it takes him very deep, as teacher plants like that can, and takes him by surprise and takes him very deep into the earth and into the shadow, what we might call the shadow. And he experienced some really strong visions and then some nightmare visions. And these big reptilian creatures came to him and said to him, basically, in the midst of this experience, which was more than just a vision or a hallucination, it was a very real experience, that these beings came to him and they said, we started the earth, we took over the earth, we created you, we took over the earth, and we now control you. So he had this experience which naturally upset him a little bit and freaked him out. So when he came back from this and the ayahuasca wore off, he didn't know what to do with this. He had this information, he didn't know what to do. So he thought, I need to go to the most powerful shaman in the area to find out, to share this vision with him. So he goes to, he finds out what the most powerful shaman is, 3 days journey away upstream or whatever. And so he goes and he finally gets to this shaman and he gets there and he's shaken. He hasn't been able to sleep since he's seen this vision. And he's shaken and the shaman says, what's wrong? What's wrong? And so he recounts his vision that ayahuasca told him in great detail. And he told her, and then he got to the part on these reptilian beings. They told him that they were now controlling the world and they'd taken over the earth. And the shaman started laughing. And he said, oh, they're always saying that. And that was when he learned the discernment, maybe, of the vision, how very real visions. And he went back to train and learn again with the ayahuasca. So I don't know. I just thought I'd like to share that story.
Okay, everyone? Okay. I once had my shoulders massaged by David Icke at one of his very early workshops. So how about that, eh? Anyway. Right, we're going to be this side first. So were there any questions waiting on this side? Yes, this gentleman. Hold on. We'll come back over your side in a moment.
Hi there, this one's sort of out to the main panel there. Is it just me, or is everyone getting a bit worried about this militarisation of the Olympics, you know, these missiles on tower blocks and all this kind of stuff, and army in the centre of London? A lot of my friends who aren't into all this alternative stuff think it's normal, and I'm thinking I must be out of step because it seems rather frightening, this whole thing, but everyone seems to be comforted by it. But I just wondered what your thoughts are.
I don't think you're in the minority in this room, let's put it that way. Isn't it strange how we've got the army on the streets and nobody's batted an eyelid? And the thing with how these things tend to happen is Is this just for the Olympics? When are they going to be withdrawn? How long is this going to go on? God forbid that there is some sort of tragedy, because you've got your problem, reaction, solution. Or we've got to keep the troops on the streets. Oh, this is really serious now. Throw that out there as a conjecture.
It's like pub opening hours from the First World War.
Tell me more.
It used to close at 11 o'clock, and then they kept it in until 2000.
So there you go. It happened with the pubs after the First World War, and how many? That's several decades before they actually got to correct that. I mean, the whole Olympics thing is just bizarre, because the whole Olympic torch thing is a joke in itself, in terms of, if you went along the route and actually saw any Olympic signs in any shops or whatever, you can guarantee the following day they'd have the thought police around to fine them for having breached copyright, which is just bananas. It's supposed to be the People's Olympics. That was what it was sold to us about. It seems to be the corporate interests Olympics now.
One of the most pleasing things about the Olympics to me is the television series 2012, which when I turned on, I thought was going to really be about 2012. But it wasn't. It was about this Quango thingy-jiggy set up to organise the structure of the Olympics. It's ever so funny. Do try and catch it on iPlayer. It's very well acted. It's a mockumentary. Very funny. But in all seriousness, I didn't mention it in my talk today. I didn't get that far, because I'm not very good on timing. So I wanted to mention Chris Street and the Earth Stars group in London. Are there any of the other Earth Stars? Hello, hello, hello. Good. Put your hands up, nice and straight. Okay, so if there's anybody else from London who wants to find out more about it, contact those people. He's really has been working the Earth Stars grid in London for years and years, and he's really turned up the volume the last couple of years. And during Occupy, his work was published and laminated and handed around the Occupy, who occupied the PowerPoint of London at Ludgate Hill and marched the Coronation Line, and they were conscious of reclaiming the land, really. And I had an email from him just a couple of days ago, and he was sharing the information that the River Lee from Luton is named after the sun god Lu, and there's a team of people working on this river that goes around and under the Olympic Stadium. So there are groups of people working on London for the highest good, for the good of us, the people, the planet. And so therefore to try and use all the good that there is in the Olympics, because, there are all sorts of really lovely people who are, bought into it. And so that light can be used for the good. I'm not going to watch it, but because I'm not really into that sort of competitive sport. But it's good for some people. But be assured, there's a light-working team, really versed in earth energy working on the system, and they have been, and they're prepared for this August. And I'm sharing that with you because it's up to all of us now to plug into that and use our power and our connection with the earth, because it's our planet and it's our city and it's our money, but it's our city and it's our future. And I don't want to live in a military state. And neither do you. Oh, and Chris Street's in Glastonbury tomorrow. They're working from Glastonbury on it as well.
I'm glad the troops are there. If they weren't there and something happened, we would have to change our government. The government have no option because they are addressed by about a dozen national newspapers who collectively have decided that the government need to behave in a certain way. And the more troops there are, the happier those 12 or so newspapers will be. The government, because it's a global event, have to be seen to do what they're told. What they're being told is get the troops out there. By the way, you haven't heard any mention of the SAS, have you? You can be sure that the SAS are on standby. They're using a helicopter tonight, and James Bond's coming down it, I'm told. Well, a stuntman is. Yes, they've put anti-aircraft missiles on somebody's roof and they got a bit upset by it. Well, I'd get upset if I had an anti-aircraft missile on my roof because they can get set off by weird stuff. It's all sideshow, it's all circus, it's bread and circuses, the whole thing. But given the world we live in, and it is the world we live in, and there's not much we can do about it at the moment, when newspapers start banging the drum and say, behave in this way, if governments don't behave in that way, the newspapers have a remarkable ability to change governments. The Levinson inquiry is a very good example of what can happen when the press get a little overbearing. And they're going to be brought down a peg or two. But the government will survive because the government has to survive. There has to be a degree of peace and quiet. And the Olympics will go off successfully. There may be the odd strange thing, and I've decided to avoid the public transport problems and go by boat, which you can get right to the Olympic Park. It's very convenient.
You going there?
Yeah, I'm going on Wednesday. Not to any event, I'm just going to the Olympic Park. I just want to see what it looks like. And I thought, I can go by boat. What a great idea. Get champagne on it as well. You don't get that on the Underground. So if I'm here next year, if we're here next year, I'll tell you what it was like.
If anything happens the day you go there, there's going to be a lot of conspiracy theories. You know that, don't you?
Wednesday, the 1st of August. Yeah, I'm due to arrive at 10:30 in the morning. Bring it on.
Yes, do we have any co-Intel Pro agents in tonight, by any chance, taking notes on that?
Oh, I hope so. Okay.
All right, do we have a question on this side? I'll take this side, then next time I'll come to the other side.
Hello, good evening. The last couple of years, a lot of my nervous energy has been dissipated fighting wind turbines and the Green Party down in Totnes on the whole climate change argument, things like that. But another thing which keeps me from sleeping at night too well is the question of the Large Hadron Collider at CERN. Having been a physics teacher and understanding something about that, the principle is, of course, hurling subatomic particles, large ones, at each other at huge velocities, approaching the speed of light, smash them into tiny pieces to try to find the God particle, the Higgs boson, which apparently they claim they've done. Physicists more expert than me have pointed out, and there's one or two websites, that, of course, these energies, you are in excess of the threshold needed to create a black hole. Micro black holes can be a byproduct of this type of experiment. And obviously, if one of these were to remain stable, it would just swallow us up. We wouldn't need to worry about these other threats that we've heard about so far. I'm very worried about this because it's a story that it goes in the newspapers. No one really seems to comment on it very much. It's a reality. And when you hear the people, the physicists who operate this thing speak, your hair stands on end. They sound like really pre-adolescent schoolboys playing with a box of fireworks, which will give bigger and bigger bangs and get ever more exciting as they ramp up the energies. The thing consumes the energy equivalent to a small town, apparently. In an age of saving energy, they have carte blanche. And now, having found the God particle, I mean, obviously they've achieved total enlightenment, they can't stop there. They've got to go on, increase the power of this thing by some huge factor. And they're apparently building this modification in the next couple of years and going to switch it on again to create goodness only knows what. And I just wondered whether this is slipping through the net and we should be paying a bit more attention here.
I think it'd be quite a good way to go. It would be quick, wouldn't it? And you'd meet God along the way, so I'd go for that. I mean, there are so many doomsday scenarios. You know, every day there seems to be something completely new I hadn't even thought about. I mean, you know, the solar flare thing we heard about earlier in Peter Taylor's talk, which is one of how many ways is the world going to end? I mean, there just seems to be... So I don't know whether that's all there for fear. Maybe they're all true. Maybe one of them will actually happen. I certainly know that I was touring to America, I think 3 consecutive years, and on each of the autumn tour, each year, the day I was going to go, there was some huge disaster either predicted or just happened, was about to happen, is exactly where I was flying to. And I really had the jitters for about 3 years. I think someone had channeled something about a giant spacecraft over Alabama that was going to be in the skies on the 14th of October, which is the very day I was flying. I thought, great. And it was like all over the web for a while. It disappeared rather quickly when it didn't happen. And then the next year, I think we had the swine flu thing where they're going to be stopping everybody at checkpoints and injecting them with swine flu vaccines to kill them off. And then I think we had the Gulf event in Pensacola, in the Gulf, the great big thing. There's going to be a giant methane eruption, which is going to wipe out all of that side of America. And actually, when I saw where I was flying to, it was exactly this place, Pensacola, right in the bay. So I've learned to ignore all of it now.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, we've learned all about this through the press, haven't we? And what are the press doing? Spreading fear. And who has the mouthpiece? You know, these scientists who have got a nice little livelihood, thank you very much. If they didn't have CERN, they'd all be signing on the dole. Now, I happen to know a load of, you know, and I am plugged in with Earth healers, and they're working their guts out at the moment. It's our planet, and they're working with that planet. And we're going to be allowed to tinker so far, but not beyond. We're the custodians. And if there are some stupid, idiotic scientists who have too much brain and not enough heart, and they're going to follow their mind like a laser, well, I mean, they're going to be stopped. But we have to will it that they will be stopped. And so we plug in with the Earth. And I know a band of people were working anti-CERN, you know, last time. Was it last year, 18 months ago or whatever? And what were they going to do? I can't remember what they were going to do, but they were going to do something and they were going to succeed. And it failed. And they didn't know what had gone wrong. And I knew people involved in the, you know, let's combat the CERN thing, eh? And some of these people that I knew who were part of that movement and activity were on a train. And on that train, in the same cubicle or compartment as they, were two scientists on the way back from Switzerland, discussing what had gone wrong, scratching their heads. Couldn't understand why it hadn't gone according to plan. And they were talking in earshot of the people who'd been working against it. So don't have fear. Don't do nothing. Read those things in the newspaper and take action. Tell your stone, your place in your prayers. This is wrong. It doesn't have my vote. Please, will you help us? What should we do about it? And send some energy out. If we all do it, they can't do it. They can't. And they won't be allowed to. But we shouldn't be, we shouldn't turn a deaf ear to it. We should take action. It's our job too. But don't buy into that fear. Read the papers if you must. I do. I read the papers, find out what's going on, what they want us to think, and then I go and find out what really is happening. Ha.
Who was it who said, when they had split the atom back in the 1940s, I think it was Robert Oppenheim, "I am the destroyer of worlds," quoting from the Hindu books. It nearly came to pass. That nearly happened, because nobody stopped them. Nobody said, "Oh, why are you doing this?" All they could answer was, "Because we can. Because we want to." And that's probably the same with this flipping Higgs boson. I mean, so we find there's a God particle. Big deal. What's it going to help? Who's it going to help? You to follow the money. How much money is being put into this thing? As you say, it needs enough electricity to power a small town. And we're all supposed to be worried about global warming. Let's not go there today. It's just not worth it. The point is that there's a dichotomy going on between science as it is practiced by those who claim to know what to do and the way that the world is being persuaded to support them. We've got to support them because they can do it. It just doesn't make sense. I mean, you probably know a great deal more about the physics behind the Higgs boson, the search for it, and what CERN is all about. When you see Brian Cox strutting around on television telling us it's the best thing to happen since whenever, you begin to wonder why he didn't stay in a pop group.
I thought it was only me who had a problem with Mr. Cox, but thank you for saying that. Definitely.
Pleasure.
I'd just like to thank you for the way you described that, because as you know, what I do now is I look at the facts in screen fiction from the past. How many of you, quick show of hands, how many of you remember a series called Doomwatch? Oh, yeah, oh. Buggers at the BBC have destroyed half of those, don't you worry about it. Nothing to see here, move along. They actually did try to revive Doomwatch about 10 years ago or so with Trevor Eve in the starring role. We did one episode, a pilot, and it was all about scientists accidentally creating a black hole in their experiments. So thank you for that. That'll be in next year's talk.
In favour of Brian Cox. You know, he's quite nice to look at, isn't he? And he has turned so many people onto astronomy, and as we know, people do confuse astronomy with astrology. So you've got a whole lot of people interested in watching the stars and the planets and connecting them and watching the night skies and seeing the moons and learning all about, you know, all of that. And so that's really good. I mean, I walked into my mother's house one evening, and there she was sitting in the dark. And I said to her, "What are you doing sitting in the dark?" "Oh, I'm watching the sky."
If Brian Cox taught more about astrology and less about astronomy, because they're two quite different subjects, I'd like him a bit more.
I know, but, you know, you're an educated person, and I
Thank
don't
you.
want to sound patronising, of course I am, I'm really sorry. But, you know, I bought my mother a book about astrology, and she thinks it's astronomy.
Which came first?
What?
Which came first?
Astrology or the astronomy?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know, chicken or the egg.
Why don't we ask the astrologer who's sitting up there with you?
Good idea.
Yeah, a quick summary on Brian Cox, yes.
My astrologer's hat on. What I want to say about the Higgs boson thing is that it's totally typical of the Uranus square Pluto aspect that Jason was talking about this morning. Because if you look back at the whole Uranus-Pluto cycle, these are the times when we have the greatest leaps forward for mankind. Now, I always think that with figures that appear to bring mankind forward, they're Promethean types, which is the god I'd most associate with the planet Uranus, because they stand up and they sort of promulgate a new idea or something that might bring mankind on, and they usually do get shot down. You just have to look throughout history. It's littered with Promethean types. And at the moment, with Uranus square Pluto, this is a very potent time. So that is one aspect that I think represents very much this dynamic aspect that we've got. And interestingly enough, in terms of troops on the streets of London, that is typical of Pluto and Capricorn. Capricorn rules authority, it rules the military, and Pluto rules power and control. So we've got that on the one hand, and it's manifesting in particularly at the moment with the Olympics, because Pluto is going over the sun and mid-heaven, the point in England's chart to do with our public standing. So we're very much on the world stage, for good or ill. But it's in the challenging aspect with Uranus, which is the rebel, the revolutionary. He wants freedom, he doesn't want control. So therefore it's an unbalanced seesaw at the moment, with Pluto going, you know, much, much higher, but Uranus is going to react, and it usually acts very suddenly and very shockingly, actually. So I'll be interested to see how that manifests. And it doesn't, with astrology, it's very, very difficult to predict exactly what's going to happen, but it's almost like you put on a different coloured lens with the planets or the aspects. And so, like with Fukushima last year, we heard a lot about uranium and plutonium, and there's a lot about nuclear stuff going on at the moment, whether it be power or bombs. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to manifest, it's just that it's come into focus. Do you see how it operates? It's like the issues that those planets represent come into focus, but it's up to us, and the more consciousness we have, the more we can choose what we do with that power. So it's incredibly interesting times that we're living in. And I'm fascinated as an astrologer to see how it's all unfolding, because it's, just typical of what's occurring right now. Thank you.
Which came first, astronomy or astrology?
Astrology.
Thank you. Quite right.
Okay, do we have a question over here? Oh, we do. Right, I'll go right to the back. We'll come back to you in a moment, sir. Hold on.
I think perhaps Brian Cox is not the only scientist with a problem right now. The other guy who's got a real problem is Albert Einstein. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the work of Charles James Hall, who published 4 books called Millennial Hospitality. In the 4th book, this chap was a US weather observer out of Nellis Air Force Base, Indian Springs, which apparently is the base for the American Deep Space Program. He describes how these things are built and can be built here, or by Uncle Sam. And the whole construction is basically fibre optic toroidal to take care of gravitational force, etc. But he clearly demonstrates through Hall photon theory, which he has actually copyrighted, that Einstein was at least 3 force fields short of a picnic. Now, he's not the only one to say this. Nassim Haramein, who was mentioned earlier, he also said that quantum theory and relative theory, you cannot consider the two things in the same sentence, basically. So he more or less was squaring the circle, and this really takes us out of the 186,000 mile per second mindset. Both of them fundamentally say you can actually achieve 670 million miles per hour without any personal problems, G-force, etc., etc. And my question here is, if this is the case, and these people seem to be, along with Dan Baruch, who also explains very clearly that the extraterrestrial intelligence or aliens we all talk of actually are of human origin, and that we are looking at ourselves thousands of years up the timeline. My question here is really, this is an awful lot of fairly serious research that is now either being allowed to trickle out, or put it this way, how much longer are we going to be able to get access to this kind of information? Because it really is, I mean, the CERN thing is one thing, but these guys have direct experience, and to me they seem entirely credible. And it takes one to spot one.
I've certainly heard of the challenge to Einstein. I'm not familiar with the detail of it. Obviously, you're well acquainted. It's time Einstein was challenged. It's like saying the science is settled in relation to global warming. The science is settled in relation to gravitational and magnetic fields. They're not. And you're quite right to say, in my view, that the speed of light is not an absolute. It may be an absolute within our solar system. We have no means of knowing if it is an absolute outside our solar system, let alone outside the galaxy. It may well be 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times faster. We have no means of knowing that, despite what we're told. But science has to be perceived to be correct. And as soon as anybody challenges the perceived correctness of science, they are, like the medieval heretics, excommunicated. But if you follow the money, you can usually find out where the heretics are likely to be, because they're nowhere near the money. But because the information that we have access to is so much greater, there's something like a figure of, there's as much information published on the internet in the last 18 months as has been published in the previous 1,000 years. And it's an exponential increase. As people are becoming more aware of what they can find out, they're beginning to challenge these perceived certainties. And that is why the global warming problem is really hotting up, to put it mildly. It should be cooling down. Where science is being challenged by a lot of people, independent researchers who've put their life's work into it and are able to come up with persuasive arguments. At this point, they're only opinions, but then the original certainties were actually only opinions. When the church, which was the perceived authority of the time, 300 or 400 years ago, said the earth is the center of the universe and the sun goes around the earth, and if you disagreed with that, you tended to get a bit hot. Things change, and things will change in the future. We can even look back in our lifetime and see, well, my lifetime, and see how things have changed. Who would have thought that supersonic flight was going to be possible? It was possible, it's now no longer possible. And talking of deep space exploration, how many people here are aware of the X-37B, American Air Force spacecraft which landed a few weeks ago after a 15-month orbit, or shall we say flight? Nobody knows where it went. It could well have gone to Mars. It had the time period to do it. It could well have gone to the moon. It had the time period to do it. You haven't heard about it because you were not going to be, you didn't need to hear about it, let alone hearing about the X-37A, which was the forerunner of it. They look like small space shuttles. Orbiting for 15 months, nobody knew it had been launched. There's so much we don't know. And I'm glad that Einstein is being challenged. He was a bit untidy. He had body odour, so I'm told. So let's get some things out
Speaks highly of you.
What's that?
He speaks highly of you, Mr. Einstein.
Alex, I trust your sources. Thank you.
I think on the subject of sciences, I often have these arguments on Facebook, as Andy mentioned, with some of my so-called rational friends who see me as being somewhat irrational. But I've come to the conclusion that scientists are very, very good at getting from A to B. Incredibly clever set of calculations will get you from point A to some conclusion that you reach. And, you know, thousands of scientists could spend weeks, months, years and produce huge documents about how they've got from A to B. And they completely forget in the process that A was an assumption. And I think so much of science is like that. I was having an argument about evolution, or Darwinian theory of evolution. And I kept trying to make the point that Darwinian theory works if you have the assumption that there's no consciousness in the universe, you know, we're all just machines, then you pretty much have to come up with some idea like natural selection and so on. But you forget that it's only an assumption. It's equally likely that there is consciousness and that we're not just all robots. No one's proved that we're not. In fact, there's quite a lot of at least circumstantial evidence that you know, there's something out there. So I think that's the main problem with science. People are just so wooed by the very cleverness of how they have got to their position that they forget the first assumptions. And that's what I think we need to challenge over and over again, those initial assumptions.
The basic problem there is with science around the world now is one thing. It's no longer about data, facts and figures. It's about where the next research grant money is coming from. And that's the problem we have, which is why the climate change situation keeps rolling on, because every single bit of research, if it wants to guarantee it gets the money, it gets something in about proving something else about climate change. And it's quite ridiculous, but it has got that perverted now. And in terms of Einstein himself, it's a theory of relativity. It's the unified field theory. It's all theories. They were originally put out there to be shot down, not to be put there as a statement of fact, never to be challenged.
Okay, do we have another question on this side?
Hi guys, this question I think is for like everyone really. I in general have really amazing dreams, and lately in the past couple of years I've been having dreams on epic level about possibly things that are going to happen in the future, and I just leave it at that. I don't think any more of it. But I've also heard that other people are having dreams of being in a tsunami, atomic bombs, and I was just wondering, is anyone else having more epic dreams? And if so, what is going on there? Recently I had a dream where an atomic bomb was happening, and I saw the blast come, and there was cars flying everywhere. And then in the next second, I was above the earth, and I saw atomic bombs coming up from the clouds, and the feeling was, we failed, but we're safe. And I don't know what this means, but I just want to know if I'm a weird person, or if anyone is having any more dreams that are just so realistic and so epically out of the ordinary. I can't ignore it, and I think it's amazing. So I just wondering if I'm alone, or Just for everyone,
I'd like to explore that. For me, the spirit of the time at the moment, there's deep, deep wounds that are coming to the surface of the earth. And that wound is in the collective and the body of the earth. These wounds are coming up from probably a long time. There's also ancestral wounds that have been buried for many, many generations. That's how I'm experiencing it personally. And if you have if you're open to these things and open to this sensitivity and this wound, then it will be playing out in your dreams. Also, there's many potentials. This is, as I understand it, the purpose of dreaming. This is shamanically what we're trying to do constantly, is get into that dreaming, realizing that this is a dream. And as we wake up in the night dream, as we can with lucid dreams and alter it, trying to wake up in this dream and realizing that we can change the dream, change the reality. But there's many, many potentials, from very dark and very destructive. That destruction, that level of destruction that's coming through your dreams is in the earth at the moment. And the wound is coming up to the surface, so you will be picking up on that. If anyone is doing any ceremony or any healings, the healing, I work predominantly as a healer, and I mean, it's gone crazy. Everyone is facing up to some of their worst fears. But this is the meaning of the time, and this is the purpose. And as I understand it, it's going through a big transmute. We have the opportunity or the potential to transmute this, to cleanse. It's an earth cleansing, and we can do that on the dreaming level as well as the physical level, as someone was mentioning earlier. The important thing is to work with your dreams, ask for the healing, where the healing can come out of that. So when you wake up after a full-on dream like that, and it probably affects you, write it down, ground it. The whole point of shamanism, and these are really challenging times, but we don't have to give birth to everything that's in the collective dream. This is, I think in the West, we have this problem where we dream something, we have this vision, and we think we have to manifest it. And that's like uninitiated behavior. We can give birth to it through ceremony, through ritual. You can work, if you're being chosen to work with these dreams, ask how you can work with them, how you can bring them through creatively. So that might be through art or through performance or something, where you can ground this energy, disperse it. That's what we have to do at the moment. We have to disperse this, because it's powerful times. And as Helen says, that's deeply platonic dream. And with that Uranus Kickstarter, Firestarter. So work with it. Ask the dream. Also ask before you go to sleep how to have a healing dream out of these dreams. Where's the resolution? How can I transmute this energy? Learn to ask the questions, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think you're very much picking up on the collective. I think there is a collective anxiety going on at the moment. And another reason is because we're going through the death process of the age of Pisces that's been with us for the last 2,000 years into the new age of Aquarius. And death and birth are painful, anxious times. And if you are sensitive, you are going to be picking up on that. But it's in the collective. There's a lot of anxiety. And I mean, even it relates. And I think we learn a lot through relationship, perhaps the most. The numbers have doubled in this year than they were last year, even. So it's out there. It's out there.
I just say on that subject of collective anxiety, I think anyone who reads the newspapers is scared most of the time or watches the news, but I think us in this room, we're probably scared of a whole different set of things, but it's the same emotion. Maybe people who read the news haven't come across some of these ideas before, but, we're scaring ourselves with other things.
I think we have to befriend the spirit of fear, because the spirit of fear is here at the moment, and it's there, and there's been a lot of talk about transcending it and stuff like that, and people come in and they want to get rid of their fears. That's crazy. How can you get rid of fear? Fear is here for a reason. Fear wakes us up sometimes. We can be sleepwalking through life, and then and that wakes us up. So it has its use. But like you say, it's been manipulated or whatever, or it's so constant. But we need to befriend that spirit. Learn to befriend the spirit of fear, because it's there, but also when you can befriend it, what you might find is going through it, you can reach ecstasy, the spirit of ecstasy. Often when fear is transmuted, it becomes ecstasy, and that's where a lot of ceremonies, like you can use it. Shamanically, we use it all the time. It's a force, it's an energy, it's a power. So you use it, but you use it to transmute it and turn it into ecstasy.
How much do you think this theory of infinite consciousness, and we're all here just having an adventure, and therefore we've got nothing to lose and everything to gain just by playing our life out? I mean, is that where we are? That really the only reason we've got fear is that we don't understand the nature of reality?
No, I think fear has a purpose, and I think reality works on many different levels. Yeah, certainly on one level, but if we're always trying to be on that level, then we're not going to ground ourselves. We're not going to come down into the earth, and we're not going to be of use here, because we have to be here, and we're here to learn and to experience. I think I'll talk about this a bit tomorrow. There's different souls that we have. We have the body, collective soul. We have an ancestral soul, and we have a personal soul, and they need balancing. So our personal may be here for the adventure, and it may have been here many times, but that needs to align itself with the collective, because we're not, in the West we think very individually, I think, and we need to come back to that sense of responsibility. Well, not just for us. Indigenous cultures will always think every action you think about your ancestors 7 generations in advance, and that puts a different level on it, because then it isn't just about the adventure, it's actually a responsibility to the future generations coming in. I think on the main level, yeah, but even if you get to that level, you have to come back and working with what we've got.
So
here.
it's almost use that fear to your advantage.
Transmute it. Yeah, transmute.
I think it's really very interesting, and thank you for your question, and thank you for your insight, Jez, very much so. I think it's really interesting that we are actually talking about fear, because it's often been the elephant in the room, actually, at these conferences. You have felt the energy with the information coming through. And let's remember, we are all here ready to listen to what is going on in the world that the general public won't get published, the general public don't want to hear about, but one day will. And yes, our fears will come up. And it's good that they're coming up, because fear is a natural survival. But what we have to begin to learn as to what fear do we transmute, what fear do we listen to. So get rid of all the superfluous fears, that are totally unnecessary, and get to a neutral point, so that when our fear is triggered, we know we need to take heed of it. And so, as I said, when I heard David Icke on that 5-hour talk about the reptilians, oh God, the fear that came up in me that I had to live with and work with, and with many of us, oh gosh. And I'm past that now, that particular fear. So when it hits the general public, when they begin to wake up, oh my goodness me, we're going to be the people who actually possibly, hopefully, are going to be grounded and able maybe to, set some boundaries, talk some sense, hold a space. Because we're learning the underbelly stuff right now. And so if we are able to clear ourselves so that we can identify the fears, and as I spoke to in my talk, I picked up so much in the land, but I didn't know at the time that it wasn't just me. It wasn't my stuff, it was the land stuff that I was picking up on. And I needed help in that. And then obviously it resonated with aspects of me, but only 10% was mine and 90% was actually what I was so sensitive that I didn't realise I was so sensitive, because I hadn't been brought up to be told that I was sensitive. That I was picking up. And many of us here in this room and in the world are like that. And we need to be like that. But we need to learn how to handle it so that we can be in our power and not suppress our fear, but oh gosh, right, we've got to listen to that. But I would also say as well that a friend of mine's son-in-law headed up intellectual warfare in part of the country. I don't know whether I was supposed to know that, but don't think they knew I was a Nexus reader. They certainly knew I was into crop circles, but they didn't know, the sort of dots I joined together sometimes. So, right. So we all know about broadcasting. We all know about, the patterns of noise and subliminals, don't we, and all of that sort of thing. So, what's being pumped out for us to absorb. So again, we have to be to take responsibility for our space. So I would say going to sleep at night, I had an experience of somebody trying to work on me at night. And I had a horrible, horrible dream, quite unlike what I would ever normally have. And I realized who it was that was beaming at me and what it was they wanted of me. Because actually they told me that's how they worked on people. And so I thought, oh my God, I'm being worked on. So I put in protection that night. Didn't happen again. But I knew what that person was up to. So I was, forewarned and I was forearmed and able to deal with it. And these are the sorts of skills that we need to learn about. What is the real fear? What is it we're transmuting that's, freaking us at the moment? And move through this freakiness and learn from it. But don't ignore the real fear. I mean, I honestly am somebody that doesn't normally feel fear in the everyday. What freaks other people, I can't afford to have that fear that so many people are controlled by. Can't afford it. But I do have fear that comes up, and I do get paralyzed sometimes, and I know when to work on it. So I won't go on anymore. I've said my bit.
Thanks for the question. I'm excited that you can remember your dreams. I dream, I suppose I dream. I don't remember a single one. Or, okay, this is what you do. Every time you write them down and date them. So when they come true, you can say, look, I knew about that. And so when people then believe that you're doing it right, they might take notice of things that are going to happen, not that have happened. But on the point of dreams, there's a way to induce a dream, a waking dream, because they're the ones you do remember, where you can get paralyzed in bed because you think you're being attacked and you can't move. That's a waking dream. There are certain hallucinogenic drugs which induce dreams, ayahuasca being probably the most famous. LSD is a modern version. Ayahuasca is a natural version. The shamans who took ayahuasca risked their lives. When they were able to come back to reality and recount what they had experienced, they were perceived as wise men, shamans. The more they were able to do it, because their life was on the line, when they said something that became true, they were respected for that. And in my view, that is the origin of the priesthood as we understand it today. The mystery schools of Egypt are another area. Now, obviously, there was a considerable contact between Egypt and South America. Whether ayahuasca was used in Egypt, I don't know. We know cocaine, or the cocoa plant, which is native to Peru, was used in Egypt. But there's something called white powder gold. I don't know if anybody here familiar with what white powder gold is. Okay. Check it out on the internet. We sell a couple of books on the subject. White powder gold, or ormus, orbitally rearranged monoatomic elements. It's an extraordinary substance. It basically looks like flour, but it's derived from gold bullion. If you melt gold bullion, you get molten gold. If you put it in an electric crucible and heat it to 6,000 degrees centigrade for many minutes, you get white powder gold. It has a remarkable property according to the evidence which is in the Egyptian histories and has been researched specifically by Lawrence Gardner and other people who have done it. You can check it. You can check out all the information. There's huge amounts to read about it. Because the people who were permitted to take the white powder gold, because it enhanced their spiritual aspects, it enhanced their health, they were perceived as wise men. and they were looked to for guidance, hence the priesthood. The kings fought the wars, the priests provided the guidance, hence the two parallel parts of society, which we have tended to muddle up a bit recently. Because it was so powerful, to get back to that perception of power through the spirit would threaten a great deal of what we call modern, quote, civilization, unquote. The shamans of South America, these are the real shamans, not the tourist shamans. The tourist shamans are the people who, when you go there on tour, will introduce you to somebody who'll mix up some ayahuasca and you'll take it, you'll be violently sick for a couple of days and you think you've had this wonderful experience. No, that's not ayahuasca. Well, it is ayahuasca, but that's not the true experience. The native shamans, who have nothing to do with tourists, but if you know the people to ask or you know how to approach them, they will show you the real experience. And I'm told, I haven't done it, I'm told it is worth doing. Graham Hancock has probably written the best account of that experience in his most recent books. And you can catch the video he gives on, the video he's recorded in America on YouTube, where he talks about the links between cave paintings and the images which appear in cave paintings and modern artists painting under the influence of ayahuasca. The same images appear, or same parts of images appear. There appears to be a link. Now, cave paintings go back tens of thousands of years. Ayahuasca is a very recent phenomena, and you have to ask how they found out what to take in the first place. The answer they give is they ask the plants. It's that simple. So life is very simple. And just on the subject of fear, there are only two types, flight or fight. If you fight, you get rid of all the adrenaline and you feel much better. If you flight, you run like hell, you get rid of all the adrenaline and you feel much better. It's that simple. There's nothing to worry about. The world's not going to end. It hasn't for millions of years. It's not going to in the next few millions of years. You look, the temperature will go up and down. People will get pissed off at each other and fight. But at the end of the day, we've all got to eat, we've all got to sleep. Let's just get on with it. Simple.
I just want to say something about this, the ayahuasca thing. Everyone has their different way, and ayahuasca is most certainly the way for some people. It certainly isn't the way for everybody. It's not a prerequisite to ascension or to enlightenment or to creativity or imagination. It is the way for some people, but not for everyone. So just because Graham Hancock is, into it and making a lot of noise about it, if you're feeling, don't know about that, doesn't resonate for me, what resonates for you? And respect that. What is resonating for you now may be different from what's resonating for you next year. Respect what is resonating for you.
Okay, we had a gentleman here, I believe, had a question. Yes, here we are, sir.
To the panel generally. You dealt with the previous question by referring to conspiracy theories and challenges to conventional thinking. Well, I'm going to, if you like, return the serve, so to speak. Colin Andrews, the crop researcher, has suggested that 20% of crop circles are genuine and 80% are not. Now, I want to pose the question, is that an inconvenient truth? And if it is, I think it should be addressed, because at the very worst, it, fools gullible people. The worst scenario would be that it discredits a very interesting phenomena which deals with the sacred and the profound. That's the genuine circles that are out there. At worst, it just fools gullible people, or at the very best, rather. Now, I was at one yesterday, the first one in the farm, and I genuinely felt that it could have been man-made. I wasn't the only one in the group that felt that. But if that's the way, that's another, there's another issue involved there with how the human people who make these circles interact with the genuine people who make them. So it's just a question that I'd like discussed briefly.
So you were saying 80% are man-made, 20% aren't. I think the answer to that is it's the 20% we're interested in.
20% are unexplained.
And those will be the ones that you focus in on. How you tell the difference between one and another, well, I'll leave the experts to sort of divulge that information. But this is the thing, you open saying conspiracy theories, and I think it's absolutely true right across the board that stuff is put out there by people who want it to be taken up for their own nefarious reasons, which does muddy the water and confuse the issues as to what's real and what's genuine. Certainly the question I get a lot of times asked, well, how do you know which is which? And this is the thing where I have to engage the right brain and say, it just feels right, or it doesn't feel right. For instance, you with the crop circle yesterday, that one felt man-made to you. You probably can't really quantify why, but you've got that vibe. And I think that's how you have to treat a lot of this information. There isn't actually a rational left-brain way of defining what's real and what's been deliberately constructed to look real when it isn't. There's no way apart from what your right brain thinks.
There are two sides to every argument. Crop circles are man-made, crop circles are not. One can make a strong argument on both sides. Colin Andrews happens to put some figures on it. 20% are real, 80% are not. I wonder where he got the figures from. He's never produced them. He's been asked for them. Where do you get those figures from, Colin? Which 20%? How many are 20%? Is it 200? Is it 2,000? Is it 2? He's not come up with the answer.
Can I answer that? He claims he's been in contact with people who make them. It's widely acknowledged the skill is out there to do that because they do it for commercial concerns. So the skill is out there to make crop circles that are fairly intricate. Now, he said people are doing it. There are websites out there that maintain that they're making them, and they're challenging people who say that they're coming from another dimension.
Yeah, there's a challenge actually just being issued. I think it's still being formulated. There's an offer of £100,000 on the table for anybody who can duplicate the Milk Hill formation of, which year was it? Okay.
That's the genuine one.
Yeah, there were 409 individual circles in that formation. It was put down at Milk Hill in Wiltshire. And we all know what it looks like. It's a very impressive formation. So anybody who claims to have made it and wants to earn themselves £100,000, just duplicate it in the same field, under the same conditions, at night. And if it's not raining, there are hoses available. It was raining.
I would suggest that's amongst the 20%, but certainly the one that I was in yesterday could be easily duplicated.
Well, a lot of people claim to have made circles, and I've seen people claim to have duplicated formation, one back in the mid-1990s. And the claimed duplication was so evidently man-made as to be laughable. It has bore no resemblance whatsoever. One of the points which is not generally known about the Milk Hill formation by people who've actually done fairly detailed surveys is that the circles that appear on sloping ground are elliptical. The circles that appear on flat ground are circular. Which ones are elliptical and which ones are circular? And how do you put down an elliptical circle so that when it's viewed from above, it looks circular? This is extremely sophisticated equipment. There were supposed to be 12 people involved in it. They've been asked to duplicate it. They've yet to take up the offer. If I was going to earn £10,000 as one of those 12, I'd take up the offer, probably knowing I couldn't do it. So it'd be a waste of a night out in the fields.
And this is the thing, to actually clarify that. 100 grand for a night's work is pretty impressive. I think you could probably get B.A. Baracus and the rest of the A-team for that money.
It would be very interesting to see them attempted. I would love to see that formation duplicated. It's a very impressive formation, along with the Triple Julia set, along with the original Barbary Castle Triangle, the Mandelbrot set up in Cambridge. There are some very impressive formations out there. Somebody has created an environment that has persuaded us to be here tonight, amongst other things. It doesn't actually matter, in my view, who makes them or why they're made. The fact that they exist is enough. It's like listening to a Beethoven symphony. It's like looking at the Taj Mahal. It's like climbing inside the Great Pyramid. They're magical events which can change lives. And that's all we need to know. They can change lives.
We are very short on time, and I would quite like to get one more question in, if you don't mind. I think that's a good place to end. Sheila, one more on your side, and then we'll need to finish.
This is our last one then, is it, Andy? Ooh.
My question is it a language, and can anybody understand that language of the crop circles? Can we return, are these attempts at returning, having a conversation? Are these circles a conversation?
I'd just like to say that I think that it's an incredible phenomenon. It's, in terms of New Age phenomenons, for instance, the astrology world, it attracts an awful lot of females, and a lot of the alternative world does. And the crop circles, it's quite interesting the way it's pretty much 50-50. You know, the men, you know, the masculine, I'll put it that way, is very much interested in the geometry and the mathematics of it, and you know, the feminine is very much to do with the, you know, the beauty and the feel of it. So just from that point of view, if anything is going to kind of speak to us, I don't know, it just makes people think. Because if just one of them is not man-made, then that is an incredible question that we've all got to ask. Okay.
Marcus, when they sent one of the space probes out into deep space, they had symbols on that which were reckoned to be able to be understood by any intelligent life out there. So I think the question is basically, is this in reverse? And perhaps we haven't got the skills to comprehend yet.
Well, they have answered us. Yes, that was sent out. Was it on the Viking probes? It was a plaque created by Carl Sagan, amongst other people, and it was attached to the side of the craft. And it basically tried to show where the craft came from, if anybody should find it in the future. And it showed it coming from the third planet out from the sun, and there were 10 planets in the solar system, and this is what man looked like. And they used a binary system to show the population and the DNA code and various other pieces of information.
Everything an invasion fleet would need, basically.
Basically, yes. Okay. But again, I forget the year that it appeared at in Hampshire by the radio telescope. There was an answer. Hmm? Right. There was an answer which had enough differences in it, saying that carbon wasn't, as we said, carbon is what we're based on. This one said it was silicon. There was certain population, there was certain planet, and it appeared to have an answer to the question we'd put out. But of course it couldn't be an answer, could it? Because that spacecraft hadn't even got beyond the orbit of Neptune at this point. Therefore, it was all a fake and a hoax, and dismiss it, go back to bed. And then the alien face appears, holding up a disc, which can be deciphered. Is this the work of a few guys out in the field creating something that we're all going to get interested in? They are not going to get acknowledged for it. They are not going to get any money from the photographs that many people will sell of it. It doesn't make sense. I know that Bob Irving and John Lundberg, who are artists, claim that it's the art that's important, it's the reaction of people to their creation. But that is assuming that they created them all. And they've never said that, they never claimed that. There are many people who have tried to interpret the information, and some of it is extremely sophisticated, specifically the geometry, which is the stellar language. Geometry will be understood with anybody, by any source, who understands numbers, and numbers are universal. So there may well be a language, but I don't think we're quite up to grasping it yet.
I agree, and I think one of the things that I hear from us humans a lot of the time is there's one answer. There's one thing that's going on, and these are multidimensional, and the geometry is a part of it and a very important key in some of them, as is our perception of the astronomy or the astrology in some of them. What we feel and what we pick up is another level. And I know that's always getting pushed aside, but I'm sorry. We're having to grow up now and be able to actually decipher and have confidence in what it is that we're feeling and find a language for that. Because it actually is what we're picking up, as well as in our intellect. How is it affecting our bodies? That's a barometer. So, yeah, I reckon it is a language. I reckon it's probably other things as well, which is probably beyond my imagination.
Okay, we have to leave it there. But there's one more task for you as a panel. And we always do this. It's a good way to end. Each one of you in turn. And we'll start with Piers, because he's looking most puzzled.
Oh, dear.
Okay, very briefly, like a minute or so. Where do you think we're going? What are your hopes and fears?
Oh, great,
Life,
thanks.
the universe, and everything. In 1 minute. Piers, over to you, sir.
Oh, my God, you could have warned me about this. Well, I hope we're going somewhere positive. I think and hope we are. I think there's, there are clearly lots of major things happening in the world. Huge climate of fear, as we said, but at the same time, crop circles, wonderful things, spiritual dimensions that we hadn't dreamed of emerging, and I think hopefully that will eventually win whatever's going on at the moment. Will win over these rather more concerning things. So I think that, my biggest hope, we're heading for a lovely, wonderful world of peace and harmony, and no mobile phones. That'd be good. That's my answer.
Yeah, well, I've had it quite tough the last couple of years, actually, and I think so have a lot of people, especially, a lot of energy workers, healers, people into the crop community. All our stuff is coming up at the moment, thick and fast, and that's good, because that's what is happening, is what is supposed to happen, because the earth is shedding, and we're part of that. So for the time being, I think, it's full on, exhausting. We have to dig deep in our resources to cope and evolve through that. And I have great faith in the great sort of silent majority of the human race who have a good heart and who are very wise at core, and that they don't say very much, but they observe and they think and they keep their own counsel, despite what we get blared at. Ha, pun.
I'm just going to recite 5 lines of a poem, which I found particularly impressive. It's on the Eden Project. Nobody knows who wrote it. Well, I don't know who wrote it. And it goes like this. Work like you don't need the money. Love like you've never been hurt. Dance like there's nobody watching. Sing like there's nobody listening. And live like it's heaven on earth.
Wow.
Follow that.
Yeah. Well, I think we're in the process of growing up. And it's like, as a species, we're like teenagers. And I think it's, rather than abdicating responsibility or leaving it, you just have to look at the question time or MPs, the way that they're just like a bunch of kids. And they're, our rulers are the ones, we put them in their place, so they represent the collective. So I think we're in a process of that teenage time where we're trying to individuate and break away from mummy state and all that. And it's difficult. We're fighting it. But it's a process I feel that we've got to go through. And I think ultimately it will be positive because it will lead to greater consciousness and more enlightenment about things.
I am extremely positive about the future. I was saying to someone earlier this afternoon, it was only sometime like 2006, 6 years ago, that I actually understood what the world is all about and actually began to crack the code and get all this information sort of falling into the head and getting a grasp on things. I think for one thing we forget, and it's so easy to forget, we don't need everyone to understand what's going on or to be with us to actually make the difference to this world. I think someone worked it out, and again, where the statistics comes from, I don't know, but I think it's 13%, 13%. As soon as 13% of people get something, it becomes this 100 monkey syndrome, and everybody will get it and everybody will understand. So forget all these people who are watching their soap operas, watching their game shows, watching the reality shows and thinking that has anything to do with reality. And especially forget all those who are worshipping a series of satanic rituals which are currently kicking off this evening. Because guess what? None of that is relevant in the big picture. What's important is that we grasp hold of the 13% who are in a position to understand what's really going on and what can be done to change things. And together, just us will make the difference.
It feels like to me we're going through a rebirth process, and that, despite what anyone tell you, or anyone who's been on a healing journey, it's hard. A death, rebirth is, I mean, people talk about it and bandy it around like it's just, oh, it's another death and it's another rebirth. It's extraordinarily painful. It's like shedding the skin underneath. You're very raw when you've shed that skin. You're very sensitive to life. Through that, though, great healing can come, because you are very sensitive to life and you are very in touch with life. In the worst and most degrading human situations, there can be beauty. And as I understand it, the spirits eat beauty. And I think as we are part of spirit, we eat beauty. And that we need to beautify the world more, find beauty where even in the hardest places. And that means sometimes facing head-on things we don't really want to face, or open our hearts to things that we really don't want to open our hearts to. But I feel that when we can do that, we arrive, and when we have truly arrived and here on earth, then that is when, and we surrender. Paradoxically, that's when the real transformation happens, because we stop trying to force it, or we stop trying to create it, or we stop that energy, I've got to create it. It's that surrender into beauty, into something greater than ourselves.